Welcome to the Lazy CEO Podcast, where Jim Schleckser, author of Great CEOs Are Lazy and founder of the CEO Project, features compelling experts and topics for CEOs of mid to large size companies. Now, let's get started with the show.
This podcast is brought to you by the CEO Project. At the CEO Project, we work with CEOs to help them grow their business. And our members represent billions of dollars of revenue and profit. And frankly, amongst all of us, we've probably made every mistake in the book, including some you haven't made yet. So if you want to learn from the experience of a bunch of really seasoned CEOs, we're a great place to hang out. In this podcast, what you're going to hear are some of those ideas, concepts, and things that are just going to help you on your journey. If you want to find out more, reach out to us at theceoproject.com, or you can contact me personally at jim@theceoproject.com. Happy listening. Today, we're going to flip the script. Instead of me interviewing somebody, as you normally hear me do, I'm going to be interviewed by a friend of mine, Dr. Jeremy Weitz from Rise 25, as our special guest. I first met Jeremy as we were thinking about developing this podcast, and that's what his company does. So he interviewed me, and this is a guy that's done thousands of interviews and has been in the podcast industry since you could spell podcast. And today what he's going to do is work with me and talk about my origin story, which, hopefully some people will find interesting. Sort of how did we get to this place? So Jeremy, I'm going to hand it over to you, and be gentle, please.
I'm never gentle, but you don't need gentle. And I just want to say, everyone should check out your books for sure. And, if you would just, great CEOs are lazy, right? And you also have professional drinking. And these are really good. And so we may touch on some of those pieces of the books because they're really instructive, but to hear where someone's at, it's always great to hear where they came from. But I would like to just take a minute and just tell people about the CEO Project and what you're doing currently so people understand what that looks like.
Oh, you want me to do it? I thought you were going to do it. I was all impressed. What we do is we work with CEOs around the country. We've got between 100 and 200 CEOs that we work with right now. And what we focus on is larger CEOs. So generally, $20, $25 million minimum revenue. And our largest companies we work with are about $2.5 billion. And that's unique. A couple of reasons why it's unique. One is, finding those CEOs that have the right level of humility and learning and so forth, a little bit hard to do. And we do screen pretty rigorously for the right caliber of individual. The second is the caliber of the advisors and the coaches. And so we've all run companies at scale. We've all had massive levels of experience. And so lots of firms have just pure coaches. They really have never run anything significant. And I don't know how you coach a $100 million CEO if you haven't had real exposure in that space. We do. It's a little harder model to run. And then the third element is we have a very rigorous methodology. So there's some work involved. It's not like a lot of networking groups where you can just meet interesting people, and that's cool. What we do is you do get to meet interesting people, but we do work hard, real work together to improve yourself and improve your business. And so we get this definitive change in performance as we hit inflection points in your business, these really hard issues that you run into. You bring that to your group, to your coach. We help you process it. And, even if we get 2 or 3 or 4 great ideas a year, that can really change the performance of a business. So that's what we do. Work with CEOs, both one-on-one and in group, to improve themselves and their businesses.
Yeah. One idea a year is huge for a company. And, not everyone knows you've done business in 40 countries. You ran a technology business valued at $1.6 billion. We're going to walk through some of that, but why did you decide to create this company?
So as I ran various companies, I was in a very similar peer group structure. And I found it, a couple of things. I found it immensely valuable for me on my professional journey as I hit kind of critical points and I needed somebody to talk to because I didn't have an effective board. Some things you just can't bring to your management team. And so I got immense value out of it. And when I left the corporate gig, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, I thought about, do I want another corporate gig? Do I want to start a franchise? Do I want to And the answer was, boy, I just love this business model. I love the intellectual stimulation. I love the people. I love the impact. And I said, this is what I want to do. And I got to tell you, Jeremy, I am in my happy place. I mean, some people talk about you find work that you love, that it doesn't feel like work. I'm there. I love the people I work with. I love what I do. I love the impact. It is just a total fit for me. Other things wouldn't be. I'll give you an example of a wouldn't be real quickly. I had looked at opening up a bunch of Dunkin' Donuts. Long story about why Dunkin' Donuts, but they're vastly underpenetrated in my particular area. I said, well, this is easy. I'll just, step and repeat, easy peasy. But think about like intellectual stimulation, zero, need for creativity, zero. Like those are two things I love to do. And so even though financially it could have been very lucrative, I just couldn't bring myself to doing it. And so this is a much better fit for me ultimately.
Yeah, I was watching an interview with Warren Buffett and Bill Gates the other day, and that's exactly what Warren Buffett said too. So I want to know what
that he wouldn't open a Dunkin' Donuts.
Exactly.
Well, that's the only way he and I are alike then.
You're more alike than you think. I want to know what people, when they come to the group, what do they want to get out of it? What do they say they want to get out of it? And then I know there's stories of they didn't expect to get certain things out of it once they join. What do they come to, wanting out of the group? And then what happens on the other side that they didn't even expect?
I think all people that we work with come to it hoping for some kind of improvement in themselves and their business. I mean, that's pretty clearly what we talk about. And from their point of view, they say there's not a lot of places a CEO can go to make themselves better at the job. I mean, I could go get an MBA or something, but I can tell you I've got one. It doesn't really help you become a better CEO, honestly. Because, if it was black and white, we just decide. It's when it's like 37 shades of gray and I got to pick the right shade of gray. That's when the hard stuff is. And that's what a group can really help you process.
You have a really great depth and width of your career. So I want you to take me back a little bit so we understand how we got to this point. Take me back in the beginning and a little bit fast forward through some of the things that you've done.
Yeah, I'm going to go really maybe two early experiences and then jump into the career. One is early in life, I was sort of contemplating mortality, shockingly, as a pretty young guy, 12 or 13 years old. Not because I had death anywhere around me. I just figured out, oh my gosh, we only have so many years on this planet. And so what am I going to do? And the idea that I want to have a really significant impact was the thing that came to me. And so that was one. And the other one, as a Cub Scout, we would sell things to raise money for the pack and the troop. And it came to me, we were selling light bulbs, which sounds crazy, but you have this poor little Cub Scout schlepping around a neighborhood with a gigantic box of light bulbs, trying to sell light bulbs to people's homes in their uniform. And so I would do it. And, I was really good at it. People would say, we don't need light bulbs. And I would go right to, well, in the next year, how many light bulbs do you think you'll replace? And I go, geez, I don't know, 8 or 9. I said, wouldn't it be great to just have them sitting here ready to go? And they go, you know what, you're right. And so I would win every sales contest, oranges, magazines, light bulbs. And I triggered to me like, I'm decent at this. Like I never trained, I'm decent at it. Anyway, later went on to engineering school, got a chemical engineering degree. And interestingly enough, sales, when you're in that kind of academic-y, we're smarter than everybody in the world kind of universe, sales is not what they want you to do, right? That's like the bad thing to do. But I left engineering school, became an engineer, and I was a very mediocre engineer, frankly. But I was a really good sales guy. So the first chance I had to sort of jump over to the sales and marketing side, I did that. That was with Rogers Corporation. And I started as the product engineer and then jumped over to do marketing and sales of the product I had. Just a quick story there. So I was working with the guy was my boss, and I was doing a market share campaign for my product, trying to move share from some competitors. And at some point, my boss comes in and goes, well, how's it going? I go, well, let me tell you, there's $1 million of opportunity that I've identified. I've contacted 800,000 of it, and I've already closed $500,000 of the opportunity that was out there. So we make about 50% margin. So I've made you $250,000 in profit minus my salary. I'm a pretty good deal. And he stopped and he goes, I wish everybody thought about it like that. And it just confused me. I'm like, well, like, what would the other way to think about it be? I mean, I can't even imagine another way. So the idea of always adding value and creating value and creating more than you're worth, I think that was really, and probably my dad influenced that, but that helped me move up. Then went
I'm
over
surprised they ever let you leave with that mentality.
They tried to keep me. Yeah, they did. I said, hey, I finished my MBA while I was there, and I said, hey, I'm now a big shot MBA. What are you going to do for me? And they were going to move me to Detroit, which sounded like second or third prize to me. No offense to everybody in Detroit, but I said, that's not going to work. And they said, well, we don't got anything else. I'm like, okay, I'll just create the other thing on my own. And I left. I think they weren't real happy about that. Yeah, but it happens. Did marketing in this other company for a while, and then took over a small division for them, doing capital equipment. This is NAY is the name of the company, an old Connecticut company. And, this is where my sales ability came in. I think I took it over. It had $200,000 of revenue. I grew it to 3 or 4 million pretty quickly. They asked me to take over as president of this little division they had. And I did that for a number of years, 29 years old. It was the most gigantic mistake they ever made in their lives to let me be a president of a business. And we did okay. We grew. This is a time when they were replacing chlorinated fluorocarbons because it was punching holes in the ozone. We played into that by selling a water-based cleaning technology. And so we were growing really well. Unfortunately, and this is maybe a fatal flaw that hopefully I've gotten better at, but I was really optimistic. And, I had a very tough boss that I worked for. On his fourth divorce, kids hated him, not a wonderful human being. And he would be pounding me for like, what's the revenue? What's the revenue? What's the revenue? And I would be overly optimistic, honestly. And then I'd miss the monthly numbers. And over time, that kind of soured him on me. And then he ended up putting another president on top of me. I'm like, well, my career here is over. I got to go. I said, but first, I'm going to crush the sales records. So I took an entire year, blew out the numbers, and then I left. Went to Boston, joined a company called General Eastern, was going to be a VP of sales and marketing. And within a couple of months was the president of that business, grew that one a lot. Learned M&A during that time, did a lot of global business during that time as well. Europe, Asia, mostly Japan, excuse me. And I'd always wanted to do international business. So that was happy for me to be able to do business around the world. Sold it to an English parent company, convinced the owners to sell the company, and I went with the deal. And there I learned sort of the UK European way of doing business, for good or for bad. We then decided to sell that whole entity and a bunch of others to GE. They pulled me out, and I did business development for a while. So I was doing M&A for the whole company. And at that point, we bought this business in Maryland for $1.6 billion. So you say, oh my gosh, it's a lot of money. Well, it was at the peak of the telecom bubble. And so we bought their overpriced company with our overpriced stock. And so it all kind of worked out. But I ran that business for about 4 years. Unfortunately, the market had really massively turned. So we had a couple of good years and a couple of really tough years. But again, very global business, very complex business. And I helped run the entire entity, right? All across the planet. I was on all the strategy, in the annual report, all that kind of stuff on a publicly traded company. And long story short, well, maybe a little longer. My mentor, the CEO, ended up getting sideways with the chairman of the board. They're going to exit him and replace him. I was a candidate, although frankly, I was pretty young to take that job. And I didn't think they were going to, I told them that. I said, don't consider me. I'm not ready for it. Well, they brought me into the process. So I was a candidate. And, I was actually recommended by a number of the people to take it over. But I met with the chairman, without going into his name. And you know how you have a conversation with somebody and you go, I could jump on the table and start dropping golden nickels out of my mouth on the table, and I'm not getting this job. There is nothing I can say or do to change this guy's preconceived position. So we sat and had a nice conversation, and I went home. This was in London, and they hired another guy, an outsider. And as sometimes happens in corporate changes, I was fired about 60 days later. He had his guy. It's an occupational hazard. I had a former controller who said, I know why you guys make so much money. I'm like, this is my controller. Why? He goes, it's just severance in advance. You're all going to get fired one day. And his words turned out to be more true than he knew. So after that, I said, I've basically been working nonstop since I was 14 years old. I'm going to take a little break, figure out what I want to do. And that's when I considered Dunkin' Donuts and other jobs. But I loved this business. And so I had a partner for a little while in the beginning, but pretty quickly went into this business full in. And I've been doing it now since 2005. So what's that, 17 years now, almost 17 years.
Jim, you mentioned being overly optimistic, and I would love to hear some of the big mistakes either you've made or that you've seen that other CEOs should be watching out for in their career that would be instructive, and maybe they'll be able to avoid some of them.
Well, optimism is one of them for sure. And I hope to think I've moderated that optimism gene a little bit. You hate to say you've taken the joy out of something, but in the corporate environment, I used to say, you get measured on predicting one number. Like at the end of the year, profit and revenue. And if you miss it, you're a knucklehead. And if you make it, you're a genius, right? And so basically my whole year is on like a 15-second or 15-minute decision that I make. It's insanity. So our learned advice is you'd rather be a bum at budget time and be a hero all year than be a hero at budget time and be a bum all year, which is, that's ultimately what happened to me in that job. So that's one. I see it all the time. Really, particularly people that came out of a sales mode, they're very optimistic. Everything is possible. And just moderating that with the real risk. Like my answer is really listen to your CFO. You may not agree, but you need to incorporate some of their thinking because they're generally a little more pessimistic. So that'd be one really key mistake. I think the other, there's 30 that I could get into, Jeremy, but I'll pick a couple. Another one is, all CEOs are special human beings. They have a gift because otherwise they wouldn't have that job, whether it's sales or engineering or finance, or they're just really smart, or they're super engaging with people or whatever. And part of the problem is that they are gifted enough that they can outthink their organization, right? The question is, what's the average intelligence of your organization? Average. What's yours? Probably not average, right? And so you can outthink your company so fast and so easy. So I'll see them come forward with this 7-point plan that lays out the next 3 years of the company. And the problem is because people can't see what that person sees. They're not at the same vantage point. They don't have the same background. They don't have the same horsepower. They go, he's out of his damn mind. How can you know that like this, then that, then this, and these three things? And it's not possible to know that. Well, it is, but they don't understand it because of everything in the background. And so my answer is, look, make the 7-point plan. Tell everybody 3 points, the first 3 points. Once you knock one off, tell them the next one. And so the propensity to outthink their organization is really high. And sort of related to that is because we're such incredibly good problem solvers. When somebody gets their company just humming, like making money, hitting marks, doing all the right stuff, the question is, what does a firefighter do when there's no fires?
Sleep? I don't know.
No, they set a fire. They do. It's like number one arsonists are firefighters, because they're bored, right? CEOs can be arsonists if they're not careful. So everything's running. They'll go set a fire. They'll go create an emergency that people have to respond to so they can solve the problem. And so you got to be really, really careful about that because you can twist your organization up through that behavior that's sort of self-satisfying, but not overly productive. I don't know. I could list you 30 other things, but those are a couple that come to the top of mind,
Yeah, no, I mean, I could listen to these all day, honestly, because it's really you sharing one potential mistake that you see people make will save them so much anguish. So maybe there's a separate episode where you just list the 72 top mistakes that CEOs make, because I could listen to this, but I do want to focus on one of them, which is, if you look at Jim's website and LinkedIn profile, there is a picture of a hose and it's kinked. And you talk about this in your book. And one of the biggest mistakes you talk about people making and is not focusing on the kink.
Yep.
So talk about that.
Yep. So this goes back to Rogers, believe it or not. When I was at Rogers as an engineer, I read Quality Magazine because we were all about TQC and all that jazz. And in Quality Magazine was serialized a book by a guy named Dr. Eli Goldratt. Eli Goldratt was an Israeli physicist, came to the US, and he came up with this idea of theory of constraints, which is a general systems theory, but he applied it to a manufacturing operation. And he talked about the idea that one piece of equipment in your factory controls the output of your entire factory. Called it the kink in the hose or the point of constraint. I think I was the guy. Actually, he didn't call it kink in the hose. He called it point of constraint. I called it kink in the hose. And he said, look, you can do work anywhere in that factory you want. It is of no value. The only place you can open up the performance of the business is by figuring out where that machine is and opening up, maybe adding a second machine or optimizing the way you use it. There's a whole bunch of techniques. What we did is, and in the book, I said, that's a general systems theory, even though he applied it to a business. You can apply it to a manufacturing operation. You can apply it to an entire business and use it as a model. And funny enough, as interviewing CEOs, and I probably interviewed, gosh, Jeremy, 3,000 or 4,000 CEOs over time, right? Most of the really good ones, intrinsically, they never used the words I used, but they thought about it as, I got to figure out what's stopping me from getting where I'm going, figure it out, and then open it up, and then I'll go find the next one. And so if you looked at their time utilization, for 3 months, they're all in on sales. And sales is fixed, and now we got it going up like crazy. They go, now I've got a supply chain problem. And so they rotate their time to supply chain. And so the idea is the only valuable work is work at the kink in the hose. I talk about it when I'm trying to unkink a hose. If I try to unkink a hose when there isn't a kink, it has no value. So find the kink and open it up is the point. It's the same in a business. So that's what we coach CEOs to do is, all right, let's figure out where your point of constraint is, your kink in the hose, which is sort of a great mental model. Then let's open up that kink in the hose. And then like a hose, let's go find the next kink and open that one up until you get the flow right, meaning profit or revenue or number of people we serve or whatever your objective is that you want to have in your business. And so when they come for their quarterly meetings with their CEO peer group, what they bring is a case study at their point of constraint to help bust open the point of constraint. And if you can imagine, I'm always focused on the point of constraint. I'm getting great strategic advice around the point of constraint to bust it open. You get a different result than you would through a more sort of random walk or stakeholder model of engagement.
Yeah, I love that because the force function is not only of the group itself, is you're surrounded by amazing people, but you're having them focus on the right things, which is key. And so I do want to talk about the 5 hats, and we talk about the goal. The goal is a great book. Also, obviously, great CEOs are lazy. I could give you a reason why I vote for great CEOs are lazy over the goal. One of which is the goal, I think, is 11 hours and 45 minutes on Audible. And the great CEOs are lazy is 5 hours and 18 minutes. So that's a good argument. Just get the shortcut. If your great CEOs are lazy, just listen to this one and get the cliff notes. So
particularly if you're not running a manufacturing operation, right?
Exactly. So talk about the 5 hats.
Yeah, and so this was really an innovation that we put on top of taking that theoretical lens and applying it to the problem of CEO engagement. So we talk about, and it was designed to be a mental model that you could use as a CEO to figure out where am I spending my time and am I spending it appropriately? What are the high leverage roles that I should be in? And when I define high leverage, it's invest time and get a multiple return, right? No one-to-one stuff, multiple of return. So the first two hats to think about are ones that we use to find the kink in the hose. This is not in the book, so this is all bonus material right now. To find the kink, you use either the analyst or the learner hat or the player hat. And so analyst or learner is about going to figure stuff out. And part of finding the kink is, looking at the data, looking at the spreadsheets, researching that particular problem, maybe going to a conference to help learn more about that particular topic. That's all understanding that causes me to say, okay, that's the kink, right? It also helps guide you on fixing the kink as well. Player mode, and that's probably better for the introverts in the group, right? Player mode is probably better for most entrepreneurs, and that is dig in and go do the job. Like if you're running a call center and you want to figure out what's going wrong, go work in the call center for a day, take phone calls, talk to people. At the end of the day, you're going to know what's going on in that call center and you'll know where the problem is. So those two are for finding the kink. Now we go to fixing the kink, and there's three hats that tie to fixing the kink. One is architect, then there's coach, and there's engineer. Architect is when I have to think about the business model. So this is, who do we do for what? What margin do we have? How much recurring revenue? How capital intensive? All those things around business model design. And I got to say, if I had to pick one hat to spend a lot of time on, is get your business model right. If you have a bad business model, you are doomed to endless hard work without a great result. You got a great business model that has great leverage in it, the same units of work will get you a much better outcome. So business model first, which is the architect hat. The second is coach's hat, and that's all about talent. And this is a lot. People talk about Collins, get the right people on the bus, all that, get the people in the right seats. That's the coach hat. And I think about it as, like a coach of a baseball team, your job is to figure out how to put the right people on the field, coach them up and improve their performance. But frankly, when they're not performing, move them to the minors or move them to another team. So that's part of the job too. It's not all the positive stuff. There's some negative stuff in there too. But it's all about talent. It includes, by the way, advisors, board members, and people that work for me, as well as any peers you might have. And then the third is engineer. This is all about processes and systems. And this is about scalability. So when we start a business, we tend to throw humans at it. And what happens is you can't keep up with the growth with humans. You've got to systematize things that allows you to go to the next level. It also gives you a multiplicative factor on your labor. And we think about systems in three areas. Values are actually part of your systems. Most people don't think of it that way, but when I want people to make a decision and there's no rules, what is the guidelines on how you make that decision? Values. The SOPs, that's your human software, right? Humans should act this way in this circumstance. And then IT and digital enablement, which is really how data moves around your company. But all three are part of the systems. And sometimes you find out like, okay, we're doing the right things. We got the right people. We're not getting the outcome we need. There's a process problem that we need to go. What is going wrong in the process? But you can imagine as an engineer, or a CEO, if I engage in making a process better, I can, once it's fixed, I step back. I've permanently raised the water level. Everything's better from there on, and I could be in Aruba. It doesn't matter. So that's what I mean by high leverage work. So those are the five hats.
Jim, I just want to thank you for giving us an overview and sharing some of the lessons learned. I want to point people to the CEOproject.com, check out more episodes of the podcast, and also check out Great CEOs Are Lazy, the book. Any other places, we should point people online or on your website?
We have, we're active on Twitter if you want to check that out. And we are newly involved in TikTok. So if you want to watch me talk about stuff on TikTok, you can find us there. We're going to the 2021-22s kicking and screaming, but we're going in.
Love it. Check them out everywhere. And you have a lot of amazing videos on YouTube as well. So check all that out. So
awesome. Thank you, Jeremy, for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Lazy CEO podcast. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes, and check out our website, www.theceoproject.com.